Hello and welcome everybody to a brand new episode of r/ProRevenge. My name is Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do, however, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as make sure you got notifications turned on. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. Our first story of the evening is an oldie but a goodie. It's by Gustavo the Recliner 2 years ago, and it's called Tries to Destroy My Orchard? I'll bankrupt her and get her house torn down. Sorry, might get a bit long, TLDR at the bottom. Well, let's just start a few years in the past. My great-grandparents planted an orchard. It's now at least 120 years old. My grandparents and my parents were really proud of the peach trees growing on it, and they did their best to keep them in good health and well. We always threw a big party when the peaches were ready to be harvested, and we invited all of our friends and neighbors to it. I loved those parties. The neighbors on the property to the south of our orchard were particularly fond of our peaches. They were a bunch of fine old people, and me and the old man Sam were pretty good friends. He taught me a lot about woodworking with hand tools only, and we had some great evenings in his workshop and finished many a good whiskeys in there together. In return, he got a lot of fine peaches, marmalade, homemade peach liquor, etc. Sadly, he died a good 10 years ago. Cancer's a real a-hole. His wife followed soon after, and many suspected it was of a broken heart. They had no kids, so all their property was left to the state, except his tools and whiskey collection, which he had gifted to me just a few weeks before he had died. In comes Karen. The name speaks for itself. Haircut, attitude, bitchiness, the whole ordeal. She bought the property of my late neighbors, and we hadn't had the kind of money to buy it at the time, as we had met some dire straits the year before, and all our savings were gone. The first thing she did, before she actually moved in, was go round making demands of the neighbors on the surrounding properties. When it was finally our turn to listen to her gibberish, she told us that we needed to remove half of the trees, as the leaves were blowing on her property. We told her in a polite way that we won't comply to her demands, as the orchard is a vital part of our family heritage and tradition in life, and has been there for at least 120 years. She was pretty pissed, but did nothing for the time being. There are some things I need you to know before I continue with the story, however. The workshop I mentioned before was situated right at the border to our property. It was a small timber-framed building, at least 160 to 180 years old. The regulations in my state are pretty strict concerning old structures. Every structure over 100 years is protected, and you need special permission to tear it down. Failing to get this permission can lead to a hefty fine. To get the permission to build a new building, it has to be up to code, and you have to ask your surrounding neighbors if they agree, and then you're good to go. Except there's one specialty in my country. You have to keep a certain distance to the border of the property to allow emergency services full access to your property. If one of these requirements isn't met, the building is illegal, or at least only partially legal, and can actually be ordered by court to be torn down. That might come in handy later. So, back to my Karen. After our first encounter with her, she did her best to pester the whole neighborhood. She got the neighbor's dog put down because he allegedly attacked her brat. It later turned out that she faked that attack. The dog was the sweetest and most innocent dog you could ever imagine. A Bernese mountain dog. Big, but a real teddy bear. Anyways, she later got to us doing our annual peach parties, as she called the police every time for various reasons. Noise complaints, we had a band playing there in the afternoon. Arson, we had lit a fire in a designated fire pit in the middle of our property. She called the ATF on us, allegedly making moonshine. My dad had the license to distill for our own consumption. So in short, she was a real pain in the bum-bum, and after 3 years, we decided it wasn't worth it to deal with our various officers and law enforcement agencies every time we threw the party, so we just decided to quit. After she had reached this goal, she resorted to pestering us to remove the orchard. We didn't cave in, and some things started to get real fishy. Somehow, the tires of our trucks got slashed. Eggs got thrown on our farmhouse. Our cat disappeared and surfaced a few days later in pretty rough condition. It looked like somebody had tried to cut his tail off. Don't worry, he healed up completely, but we actually couldn't prove that she did all that. Then came the day that she made her biggest mistake. She had a company come in a sort of secret operation to tear down the old woodworking workshop overnight. 2 days later, they started building a big garage/recreational center/house right where the shop was. But she missed one fine detail, which got pretty important later on. She didn't ask for our permission, nor for the neighbors. A short while after, the trees right next to her property started to get sick. The leaves turned brown in the middle of summer, and the branches started to die. We lost 4 trees before we figured out the cause. Somebody had driven long copper nails into them. We had suspicion, but we couldn't prove it. So we put up some trail cameras. Perfectly legal, as it was on our own property. We caught her red-handed. My dad confronted her. She apologized, and my dad, being the way too nice guy he is, wanted to let her off the hook. But not me. The nail she drove into our oldest tree was the final nail in her coffin. I started to investigate. I had some friends at the administration of our country and asked them to do some inquiries. Turned out she hadn't applied for permission to tear down the old shop, nor permission to build a new building. I further did some inquiries about the borderline of our property. Turned out the old markers vanished over time and her building was about 3 feet on our property. After I had gathered all this info, I presented it to my parents. At first they were reluctant, as they didn't want to start a neighborhood clash, but after I recalled all the things she did to us and our neighbors, they were in. Let the games begin. First, we called the authorities on her for tearing down a protected building, and presented them with all the evidence we gathered. Then we called the building authorities on her for building a building without permission, not up to code, and not only didn't she keep the required distance to the property border, she also built on our property without our permission. Long story short, turned out the workshop hasn't only been protected because of its age, but also because it was a historical landmark which played a vital role in a conflict back in the 1860s. She got sued for this and had to pay a fine of an equivalent of about $150,000. She further had to demolish her newly built building, costing an additional $50,000. Got fined for this too, about $83,000, and had to rebuild the workshop on her own expense, which was about another whopping $154,000, as it had to be period corrected up to the smallest detail, meaning it had to be built with the correct materials, with hand tools only, and the correct dimensions. As you can imagine, paying professionals to build quite a large timber-framed building only by hand gets pretty expensive pretty fast. All in all, it cost her an equivalent of $437,000 plus further expenses as lawyers, etc. This caused her to go bankrupt, so she had to sell the property in the end, which my parents bought, by the way. Last I heard, she moved back to the big city. TLDR, Karen makes a living in our neighborhood miserable, almost destroys an 120-year-old orchard, destroys a 180-year-old building, builds an illegal house, gets fined, goes bankrupt, and has to sell her property. We've also got quite a few edits down here, but none of them really pertain to a reading version of the story. So I'm just going to give you edit number 6. Yes, the peach parties are still on, and even more lit than ever. Our next story comes to us from a guy named Mo. Literally, his username is guy named Mo. It's called Mean Lady Hates Everyone, especially us. We buy her house after she fails to pay her debt. First of all, English ain't my first language, but I try my best. I'm on mobile, so formatting may be TLDR at the bottom. The house we live in was built at the same time as hers. My parents were often at the construction site and helped if they could. The strange lady was nice to us in the beginning, but that changed soon. This happened around Christmas of 2017. We have a neighbor who is very unpopular in our neighborhood. She's well known for harassing people who use the public path at the left side of her house. This path is one of 3 to reach the public playground behind her house. If someone uses the path, she would scream at them that this is her path on her private property, which is wrong. Sometimes she'd close the path with a red and white plastic chain and wouldn't let anyone use the path. She would scream at kids on the playground when they were loud. She always has her shutters down so that she can stalk people on the street and stay unseen. If some kid's ball landed in her garden, she would bring it to the kids and destroy it with a knife right in front of them. All the kids knew this and would run by her house if they wanted to go to the playground. Okay, pause! Is it just me, or does this lady sound exactly like Neighbour from Monster House? It'd actually be kind of fun to play the Monster House PS2 game on stream or something. Let me know if you guys want to see something like that. When the neighbor's kids were playing in the winter outside in the snow, she would call the CPS equivalent in my country and tell them that they were locked outside by their parents as punishment. If someone walked by her house at night, she would often call the police due to a noise complaint. She was known by everyone in our neighborhood as the witch. But she hated my family in particular. We lived right beside her house. Our houses shared one wall. When me and my sister were young, we would use the swing in our garden or jump on our trampoline. She would regularly file noise complaints and often harass me and my sister when we were alone in the garden. If my parents heard her screaming her words at us on the first floor of the house, they would just yell back. Or if my sister walked on the path by her house, she'd scream at us. We used that path daily on our walk to school. One day, I come home from school and she was in her car with the trunk on the sidewalk. When I walked by the back of her car, she howled the engine and the dark exhaust hit me. Almost every night, she would hit the shared wall with something to wake us up. Sometimes, she would ring our door and try to make us go to the other neighbors to complain about small things. We often had lawsuits with her, one time because her trees grew 2 meters over the borderline. Another time because she built a fence by sticking bamboo mats in the dirt and tearing it down the next day, telling the police that we had destroyed her wooden fence. We won all the lawsuits against her because my uncle, who's at teaching law school, gave us good advice on how to deal with her and named lawyers he thought were good. She never paid the workers who repaired things in her house, and the electrical and water bills. When her old car broke down, she didn't pay the car mechanic and never got her car back. She was in debt and had a mortgage on her house. When the foreclosure came, we were at the court and bought her house. She was with us in the courtroom when the auction was and tried to buy her own house, but wasn't allowed because she couldn't provide proof that she had enough money. We bought her house where she lived for 20 plus years right in front of her. We bought it because my parents were at the construction of her house and knew the workers did a great job building it. We renovated it when she left. We repainted all the rooms, renewed the insulation, and put everywhere where no tiles were, new wooden floor. My grandparents will be moving into her old house this fall. TLDR, neighbor harassed the whole neighborhood and was extra mean to kids. She didn't pay bills and had a mortgage on her house, so we bought it in front of her for my grandparents. And there you have it, folks, the end of the epics. If you like these stories, be sure to leave a like on the video, as well as make sure you're subscribed, so you could stay up to date with all future videos. I know a lot of you guys are probably looking at my channel and going, "What the heck, Ryan? I thought you said you uploaded every day." And normally I try, but I did just recently start a brand new job where they've been having me work 10-hour shifts. And it's been really hard, you guys. I'm gonna be real. It's just been really hard to try and get these out. I am still trying my best. Reddit Voice ain't going nowhere, baby. So stick around, stay subscribed, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's video here on Reddit Voice. Yeah, there's no more stories. Just because I'm sticking around doesn't mean you got to. You could come back tomorrow. You could check out our video tomorrow. But right now, no more stories. We're all out. You could go home now. You could watch something else. I will be okay with it. I won't be upset. You're still here. A true rebel. No one can tell you what to do. You're just going to keep watching. Good for you. Good for you.